Hey guys, my name is LocoDoco, the better looking host of Listen Loco, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
The LCK's top seed is a curse for my money. It's not really actually as much of a benefit as people might think, even though it comes with certain advantages which are inarguable. In fact, I think this actually extends to the whole gauntlet format, and additional seeds, in some senses, receive a disadvantage as much as they receive a quite apparent advantage of skipping around, getting more prize money, and having a guaranteed placing based on the regular split. So if we look at the format of LCK, they have a league section, which is a double round robin, and the top 5 teams make the playoffs. The first round matchup is obviously 4th seed versus 5th seed. That one is just a best of 3. After that, all additional matches, 3 remaining matches, are best of 5s. So the winner of seed 4 versus 5 plays seed 3. The winner of that match plays seed 2. The winner of that match plays the winner at the top seed in the final to determine who the LCK champion is. So the concept here is we're running a league, but then we're running into a playoffs. And so we want to incentivize teams to do as well as they can in the league, not just get to like a really good record and then throw games or experiment or try and get a specific seeding. We want to reward them if they get a top placing, give them prize money, guaranteed finish. We want teams to battle till the very end for those better seeds. We don't want them to game the system like you could in the old LCS playoffs and see, oh, well, I'm a 3rd seed right now, so I wouldn't skip to the 2nd round anyway, but I would play a worse opponent in terms of matchups. If I lose a couple of games, I can play a 5th seed by being number 4. We don't want any of that, sure. It does avoid that. Top seed skips straight to the final. So, okay, there's an incredible reward. Better reward, actually, than LCS, because in LCS, you just skip to the semi-finals, or in LEC, now you skip to the Juggernaut match in the upper bracket. But you could still finish 3rd place in the Juggernaut match. You can still finish 4th place in the LCS system. The top seed in LCK is guaranteed a minimum of 2nd place and the prize money that comes with that, even if they lose the one game they play in the playoffs. Okay, that is obviously a big advantage. You can weigh up whether or not you think that counterbalances the curse I'm about to explain. It's certainly a huge advantage. It's just when you look at what I consider the curse, I don't actually think it's all that it's cracked up to be in terms of if you want to win LCK. If you want to have a chance to win LCK, being the number 1 team in that top seed isn't actually as great as you might think. So let's look at some of the reasons first, and then I'll outline some of the examples from history. So basically, my main problem, my theory here, is that the reason that the team who gets the number 1 seed and therefore skips all the way to the final gets a disadvantage as much as elsewhere, they get an external advantage of minimum 2nd place finish, 2nd place money at a minimum. The reason why, essentially, is that they won't be as sharp when they're in that final. They won't be in a great flow of form. They won't have momentum going for them psychologically. They won't have had great practice because they'll have only had camera practice. They won't have had official games to play in. They've also been sat for weeks and weeks, only able to scrim, while other teams played official matches. One of those teams destined to face them in the final, therefore has an official match play, series play advantage of being informed to some degree. Yes, they can scrim, of course, but they can't play official games. Now, scrims will never be like official games. Yes, you try to practice for an official game. You try to recreate circumstances. You will never be able to make the same pressure on yourself, have the same psychological components. You will never know with the hard choice of what you would do in a real match. In scrims, you can't make those same decisions and put yourself in the same mind state. The concept I like to evoke is a concept from MMA and combat sports called ring rust. And this is where a boxer or a kickboxer or a taekwondo fighter or now a mixed martial artist hasn't had an official fight in, let's say, a year and a half. Even if they've been training every day, like certain people used to, Nick Diaz, etc., GSP, even if they've done an amazing boot camp, maybe they did a 2-month boot camp, a month boot camp, 3 weeks with the best fighters in the world, even if they've done the best practice you can do, the reason why it's called ring rust is you haven't been in the real ring. You haven't had a real fight. So if your opponent fought 6 months earlier, that is an advantage he has over you. Now, yes, it doesn't affect every single fighter. Some of the greatest fighters of all time could do this and could come back and be amazing. But those are amazing outlier fighters. For most fighters, ring rust has an effect. It's a concept that people consider to be a legitimate thing, or they verify that they have experienced it as much themselves. And it's a real concern anytime anyone's had a lot of time off. That's why if a champion has 2 years off with a really bad injury, they often suggest in MMA he should be given a tune-up fight, a fighter against a lesser opponent, not like the next contender or another top fighter in the world, because it's just more likely he comes back, he's the champion, but he gets wrecked by this other guy who's been fighting in the meantime, and therefore it's like you never got the real fight, which was the best contender versus a champion in peak form. So you give him a tune-up fight, a non-title fight maybe, and then you bring him back for the big championship fight. That's the way they often like to do it. That's the way often they'll do it in boxing when they bring someone back. So when you consider whoever the top seed faces in the final has played a minimum of one best of 5 and at least as recently as a week prior. So a week before, they played an official game on stage with pressure, with the tournament still on the line, a proper best of 5 against another top team. And they might even have played many best of 5s. In theory, they could have played 2 best of 5s and a best of 3 before that and come in blazing hot form, tearing through opponents. Meanwhile, you've been sat scrimming, you haven't had any official games, and you're now just coming straight into that match playing someone who already played an official game last week. So then you consider, because those matches, the second and third round, are teams that are, in theory, some of the best in the league, and they're all in good form. Those, in theory, are very competitive matches. And so as a result, you're coming in facing an opponent who just played, in theory, a very competitive opponent. Then add in that you actually might lack playoff experience yourself, because in the LCK era, many teams lack playoff experience. Like Griffin has played 2 splits, and they've been in the finals twice. You might think, hey, they must have some good playoff experience. No. Before this final, Season 9 Spring, Griffin had only ever played 2 LCK best of 5 series in playoffs. Remember, a best of 5 elsewhere, relegation match, isn't the same as a playoff best of 5. They'd only played 2 ever. This was their 3rd ever best of 5 playoff series. They didn't have much experience in the playoffs. In big finals, it was only their 2nd final ever, obviously. That's prior to facing SK Telecom. Under the old OGN format, OGN champions, they would have played a minimum, and other years even more, a minimum of 2 best of 5 series just to reach their first final. You had to win 3 best of 5 series to win an OGN champions season. So everyone who'd been in finals with top competitors had way more experience back then. I mean, one of the famous examples in the LCK era, Monty used to like to mention it on Summoning Insight, was when Season 6 came along and Rock's Tigers had leveled up because they'd brought in Peanut, and so even though it went as G Tigers, they'd been the best team in the regular split, they'd famously lost to SK Telecom. So they brought in Peanut, this aggressive, mechanically strong jungler, to boost them, and it was going great. They did amazingly. I think they were like 16-2 in the round robin. They were waiting in the finals, and in came SK Telecom, and anyone knows the Rocks Tigers history knows they didn't win big series against SK Telecom when it was in LCK or Worlds. So yes, you know what? SK Telecom beat them. Now, it's not as simple as that, because the reason Peanut is the relevant player here is, yes, by that point in time, Rocks Tigers players had a bunch of experience. They've even been at Worlds. But Peanut had spent the previous year on Najin, who hadn't done a whole lot and had barely ever played playoff type scenarios. So actually, when that Season 6 spring final occurred, and the best team in Korea was in the final, and Peanut was on that best team, he came into that final boasting 1 vaguely high-level best of series in his entire career. And that had been a Korea regional match in Season 5 versus Jin Air Green Wings. So not even a top team. And his team, Najin, had lost the match anyway. So not even a particularly great matchup. That's all the experience he had. And what do you know? Peanut choked. Peanut showed himself to be a choker on many occasions later. But you couldn't have known that if you were Rocks Tigers. How could you guess? You figured you had one of the best junglers, if not the best jungler in the LCK, maybe in the world, right? LAN experience is a big deal, not just recent form and recent official match experience, but LAN experience generally. I often describe esports as a competitive ladder, and each rung is a level of experience you have to step up and show that you're capable of stepping up to go to the next level. So you can skip rungs, but usually most people go rung by rung. And as each rung comes along, there's more pressure, it's a new environment, you have to adapt to it, you have to overcome it, and then you level up and you get ready for the next change. So the first rung is online play. Then there's the most important online play, qualifiers, online leagues. Then there's offline play, but at a lower level, maybe local, maybe regional. Then there's offline play that's like you're in a good competition. Then there's offline where you're in the best competition, the best league. Then there's offline play where you make the playoffs of the best league and you're on LAN. Then there's offline competition and the playoffs of the league that's on LAN, and now you're making the semi-finals. And then there's offline competition where you make the finals in an offline league. And then finally, there's international competition. There's the playoffs of that. You can see where I'm going with this. Look at people's careers. They tend to take these steps one by one. And part of the reason why is they go to a step and they get stuck there. They haven't yet experienced that. They haven't been in those circumstances, that environment, and they have to learn to battle through it. It doesn't matter how many regular season games they won or whether they beat that team elsewhere. If that team of veterans and are top players, you face a disadvantage coming in as a rookie or an experienced player who's never been in this environment before. That's why so many players choke, despite the fact they're very skilled players, and later they get over the choking because you have to go through it. You have to be someone who's walked through the fire to know how to handle that scenario. In fact, I'd even give the analogy of those monks that can walk on fire and not get burned. Obviously, they couldn't do that instantly. They had to train to do that. And over time, eventually they became amazing at it. But if they didn't have that kind of wherewithal, it wouldn't matter. They'd get burned. Then let's look at the fact that in League of Legends, you get patch changes. So the patches that you qualified for that top seed on might be completely changed. That's happened with Griffin. There's also the fact that there might have been a patch change for the playoffs. The team you're playing in the final may well have played matches on that patch and had official game experience where all you've been doing is scrimming people behind the scenes. And you weren't scrimming them, probably. Maybe you were. Maybe you were scrimming Chinese teams or whatever, Korean teams around still. You've also got limited scrim opponents. Because of this format, that means in each round there's only 2 teams waiting for a match. So as a result, who do you scrim against? You can't scrim against the team that went out 5th place. You probably stopped playing or stopped playing properly anyway. In the old format of a bracket, you can always scrim the people on the other side of the bracket. You can be scrimming someone when you're in the quarterfinals, in the semifinals, whatever. You can always be getting your practice. So there have been 9 LCK split finals. We're only talking about the LCK era. And when I go through it, you'll see that not only is top seed a curse, but actually better seeds generally are curses, even though obviously the further back you start in terms of seeds, like if you're seed 4 or seed 3, it's only a week or so you've missed. It's less time. It's compounded if you're seed 1 because you get the worst of all the scenarios, even though you get other benefits elsewhere. So season 5 spring, the first LCK split, was the one where the dominant team in the regular split was GE Tigers, the team that became Ku Tigers and Rox Tigers, etc. Smeb, Kuro, Prey Gorilla. At the time, they had a different jungler. It wasn't Peanut. Now, this team waited in the final, and SK Telecom went and they played against CG Entus. They beat them narrowly. Admittedly, there was a sub scenario. They came to the final. And if you remember, this is when SK Telecom was using Easy Hoon. And it's only if they lost games, they would tend to bring Faker in as like the final boss. Well, famously, people remember, GE Tigers got 3-0'd by SK Telecom, swept. And it didn't matter that SK Telecom didn't even play Faker. They played Easy Hoon all 3 games and just won the championship. It's one of the tournaments, actually, that I made my infamous Coma is ruining esports history because we didn't get to see the best player of all time play because Coma just used a fucking sob instead. Well, you don't use a sob instead of Michael Jordan just because he could beat this other team in the first round of the playoffs of the NBA, right? No, you play him. So then we came to season 5 summer. Remember, at that point in time, some of those Rocks players, Smeb, etc., probably had no big playoff competitive experience, and they had to play against SK Telecom, players like Prey Gorilla, lots of experience, Faker, a bazillion years of experience, Marin, actually had some decent experience himself, had already been to OGN Champions semi-finals the previous year. You can see where the advantage lay in that matchup. It evened up some of the matchup. Season 5 summer. This is a rare example of where there wasn't really any seeming cost to the top team, but let's look at the context. So this was where SK Telecom beat KT Rolster. I think it was a 3-0 shutout. This was the one where Faker did the insane dodge of the Cassiopeia ult against, I think, Nagne was the player right at the mid lane of KT Rolster. And this is when Pickaboo was playing for KT Rolster. And this is when Faker played Riven in one game and just dumpstered them completely. It was an amazing finals. But the problem is, even if there was a gap to be bridged, SK Telecom was a lot better that split than almost any other top seed was over the other teams that they'd been facing. They were 17-1 in terms of their record, and KT had to come and try and battle again. I think KT had won 13 series or something and had only picked up Pickaboo towards the end of the split. I hadn't even had a full split with him. So they also, in SK Telecom, had tons of veterans, had lots of experience. So why would there be an issue for them? This is an example where it doesn't fit the theory, But it does, actually, if you add in the context. So let's go to the next year, Season 6 Spring. I've already talked about this with Peanut. Rox Tigers were the #1 team, best team in the world, everyone thought. They lost in 4 games, 1-3 to SK Telecom. SK Telecom came all the way down from the 3rd seed, beat the 2nd seed, who I think in Season 6 was probably KT, I'd assume, and then went into the final. Then that summer, Season 6 summer, Rox won this split, you remember? Because they beat KT Rolster. Even then, they beat KT Rolster 3-2, and KT Rolster had come from the 3rd seed themselves and beaten SK Telecom 3-2. Now, SK Telecom always beat KT Rolster, but this evened up that matchup and allowed KT to narrowly win. And then KT came to the final, and even though Rox won, Rox had been a much better team than KT Rolster over that split, but it was still a narrow 3-2 victory. I think even though they didn't lose that counts for my point. Then we go to Season 7 Spring. KT Rolster made the final, but they were playing top seed SK Telecom. SK Telecom 3-0'd them. Now that isn't as relevant because SKT was a better team and had a historical edge psychologically over KT players, but KT came from the 3rd seed and beat Samsung Galaxy 3-0. So that means that the 2nd seed ended up being wrecked, even though they had a better seed, by the 3rd seed who had more practice and all these factors going for them. And obviously, Samsung Galaxy at this point in time, Season 7 Spring, don't have tons and tons of experience in playoff scenarios. Even though they'd been at World's Finals, famously, they didn't used to go deep in the LCK playoffs until this point in time. And they did just by being boosted there. Season 7 summer. This was where Longju with BDD and Khan beat SK Telecom 3-1 in the final. Now, SK Telecom came from all the way down in the 4th seed, beat a Samsung Galaxy 3-0, still a team with not much experience, beat KT Rolster 3-2, team that had been much better than them over the split all in all, although that was a close split to be fair. So the idea that this was even vaguely close, which actually it was closer than it should have been in that final. SK Telecom had a few chances. SK Telecom had been a terrible team that split. That was where they were supposed to collapse, but end up finishing second. Just like at Worlds, they were supposed to collapse and end up finishing second. So that was some miracle shit and some miracle faker shit. But you can see again how Samsung Galaxy got punished by it, KT Rolster got punished by it, and Longju didn't, but still gave up more games than you expect. A lot of people thought 3-0 Longju for that one. No, 3-1. Season 8 Spring, the one where infamously Longju was now Kingzone Dragon X with your boy Peanut, and they'd been dominant. They'd only lost 2 series the entire round robin, and that was where one, they didn't have Khan because he was suspended for the first series. Second one, he played the first game, lost, and then I think it was against BBQ Olivers or something, and then he left the game with hyperventilation. They brought in their sub and they lost that series. So really, you could make a case they were sort of undefeated. They came into this final. Afrika was supposed to get wrecked by them. Afrika couldn't truly stand against Kingzone during the regular split. Well, you know what? Afrika has someone like Kuro with a lot of experience. They have a couple of players, Spirit with some experience. They have some players who had some legit experience. Kingzone has a little bit of experience from their time in Longju. I mean, I guess in terms of players like Pring Gorilla, they had a lot of experience. Peanut obviously has a lot of experience. Some of the others, Khan doesn't have that much experience. He'd only played in the final. Obviously, BDD didn't have much experience. He only played in the final. This was a way closer series than it should have been. It was 4 games, 3-1 Kingzone, but it was way closer than it was in the split, and people would have expected it to be. Season 8 summer, last year, KT beat Griffin 3-2 in the final, top seed 1. But Afrika started 5th seed in the playoffs, beat Genji 2-0, beat Kingzone 3-1, and lost to Griffin in 5 games. Now, Afrika Freaks was a way worse team than Griffin. Griffin almost won this split, but still went to 5 games with Griffin. And then Griffin themselves went 5 games with KT Rolster, who'd just been sat aside, but admittedly had a lot of experience. Now, I've made my points about the flaws of the format generally, but I do think when you add it all together, the problem is the benefits are outside of the server. Guaranteed second place money. Those don't help you in the game. All the disadvantages for my money affect you in the game, and the rare examples of people overcoming it. Well, what did he expect every single time the underdog was going to win? That would be a bit ridiculous. But look how many times you've seen these upset runs. Look how many times you've seen a way closer final or semi-final like round 3 than you'd expect. I think it's actually a curse to be the top seed in some sense. This video was generously supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Butt Pounder 420, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my work? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers for who the guests are on my upcoming content? Maybe you want to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.